Hi, everybody. Can you see my slides? Okay, so we'll get started. So basically, we're just going to go a little bit slower and take your questions and have a discussion. So this is the topic. We call it green municipal aggregation, but it's also called community choice energy or community choice electricity, CCE, or community choice aggregation, CCA. You can pick whatever form you want, but what it means is the community is choosing where the electricity supply will come from. In Rhode Island, pretty much everybody has National Grid as their utility, and that is going to be, apparently it might be turned over to PPL, is the new company that is trying to purchase the utility from National Grid. That is still in court. But either way, whether it's National Grid or PPL, they'll be in charge of billing and metering and owning the wires and the distribution system. But you can get your electricity from them. It's called standard offer, but communities have the ability to choose an electricity supply. Increasingly, that's what they're doing. And that's the role that Good Energy comes to the market to provide. So I will now go to a slide. And Patrick, if you could maybe go through this slide a little bit more slowly, a little bit more, try to explain the role of each player, starting, of course, with folks on the right, the community.
Yeah, that sounds good. Sure. So the community, the residents and the businesses, that's where we're ultimately trying to get the electricity. So as Larry said, National Grid, or if it's PPL, they would still deliver the electricity, but the community would be choosing the essentially the supply mix that they are sending. And one of the nice things in the community choice electricity is that the community is going to decide a default electricity supply, and then they can also have optional supplies. So what you tend to see, and what we're seeing for our communities in Rhode Island, is they're choosing a default that has more renewable energy than required, but they're still trying to be cost competitive with the market. But then they'll also offer options that let you go up to 100% if you want to, be at 100% renewable energy right out of the gate. So the community effectively decides, what those options are, and you'll get to decide as the individual consumer. So then I guess we'll back up. So we've got Good Energy, who's going to work with the city or town to really do all the suite of services that are needed. There's a lot of education and outreach that is part of this to let the community know what's happening. And so we do that, but we also procure an electricity supplier who's going to effectively create the electricity supply mix that the community wants. So that's the competitive supplier there who will serve the program. And they're the blue box in the middle. And what they'll do is they'll go out and they sign their own contracts and make hedges and all sorts of things to get the electrons that are needed, and other components like things like capacity, ancillary services. These are all parts that are needed. So they'll have contracts for that physical electricity, which is that gray box on the left. And then they'll also make contracts to get the renewable energy for the state standards, for the Rhode Island, the renewable energy standard. So that's always the renewable energy certificate, or REC as we call it. So every time 1 megawatt hour of electricity from renewables is generated, there's also a certificate that goes along with it that essentially gives the owner the right to all the environmental attributes from that electricity. So it represents the renewableness of that electricity. So they're going to buy the physical contracts for the physical electricity as well as the RECs for the state standards. So then where we have Green Energy Consumers Alliance come in is for the voluntary, the renewable energy above and beyond the state standards. And all of our communities, as I said, are looking to do that with their default product. So Green Energy Consumers Alliance is going to go out to their portfolio, which, as Larry will talk more about, they really try to keep local, and they'll source the renewable energy certificates from those local projects. And one of our roles as Good Energy is to make sure that competitive supplier that you select for your community will accept those RECs and bundle it up together into that single supply that is delivered to your community. So there's a lot behind the scenes, but as a consumer, at the end of the day, you just get your single national grid bill. The supply section is going to have the supply that your community's chosen, and it will have more renewable energy in it.
And that's the whole purpose, actually. The point we're trying to make is that we're not adopting renewable energy fast enough in order to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. And so that's why in another session, Kai Salem is talking about increasing the state standard. But then regardless of whatever the state standard is, we want to have municipalities at least have the opportunity to choose a supply that is greener than the state standard would require. So, and I do want to talk a little bit about the history is good in Massachusetts. There are over about 165 communities in Massachusetts are doing aggregation. They've been doing that for a long time. But more recently, of that 165, about 100 are going greener than required by state law. And of that, about a little bit more than half are going significantly greener, where they might be adding 5 or 11% more to the grid than required by law. And we did an analysis that says that the communities that were going greener, quite a few of them actually were able to do that and provide a savings to their customers compared to what the utility would provide. And so they were sort of having their cake and eat it too. And the reason is Good Energy has the ability to work with the community, go out for the electricity supply contract at the right time and place to do that. Whereas the utilities are structured, they have to do their procurements at certain times of the year because every 6 months the rates change. And so having that flexibility allows Good Energy's been able to find suppliers who are able to beat standard offer and be greener. Now, I know what Patrick is going to say, which is that we cannot guarantee that the municipality will always save money. And that is true because we can't predict when the utility changes its price every 6 months. There could be a time when there's a 6-month period when they could be cheaper. But what we've seen is over the course of time, the contracts that the municipalities have been at very, very favorable prices. So oftentimes the contracts are 3-year contracts, which is 6-month periods. And of that 6 periods, it appears to me that 4 or 5 of them have been to the benefit of the aggregation. And so even if they go a little bit more expensive for 6 months than the utility over the course of the contract, they're better. And so that's what we're hoping to bring to Rhode Island. We can't guarantee it, but we do expect that when it goes out to bid, that they'll find a way to have a price that beats standard offer or is very competitive with it while being greener. And that it's also price stability. Anyway, the volatility of energy prices has been incredibly difficult in the last year or so. So that's how that works. Before we go on to the next slide, does anybody have any questions or comments? Any of our guests? Okay, we'll give you another opportunity in a minute. So once again, the type of supply we're looking for, okay, electricity can come in all kinds of forms, right? Oil, coal, natural gas, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about alternatives to fossil fuels. There's a lot of people talk about the trade-off about nuclear power. It's zero emission of carbon, but it's nuclear power with some of the risks that are associated with that. That's not something that we're looking for in our portfolio with aggregation either. There's also power. A lot of power comes from Canada. Hydro-Quebec sells that to New England customers. And we're not looking at that in this context either. There's trash to energy. There's a lot of our solid waste gets sent to an incinerator where they make electricity, but we don't include that in this concept either. So what we're focusing in is what's sometimes called Class 1 renewable resources. And that is primarily wind and solar. And in both Massachusetts and Rhode Island, there are some very strong policies for wind and solar. We're seeing more and more of it developed. But we are purchasing a lot from wind and solar projects in Massachusetts and Rhode Island. But sometimes we'll go out of state to Maine or New Hampshire and other states. It's important to realize that the 6 New England states, Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut, the 6 states form a New England power pool. So if electricity is generated in any one of those states, it could be sent to one of the other states. Think of it as a bathtub with many faucets going into it, and consumers are taking from what's in the bathtub as they need. So it's not critical that if you want to buy wind power that you have to be adjacent to the wind turbine at all. It's all done by contracts. So, but what we're trying to do is use the purchasing power of communities to bring on more projects that we want to see, and that's really what we're trying to accomplish. And so it's a pretty good arrangement we have. Good Energy is excellent at understanding the marketplace for electricity, picking the suppliers, working with the community, advising them or answering their questions, trying to figure out. Now, we know in Massachusetts, there are some communities that are doing 5% more renewable energy than required by law, which doesn't sound like a lot, but the state standard in Massachusetts is only 22%. So if you add 5%, you're adding quite a bit. But then there are other communities in Massachusetts that are adding like 50% renewable energy, quite a lot. And so that can differ from community to community. And that's what Good Energy is going to be doing with the Rhode Island communities. And we're excited. Those are the communities that are signed up. They've been approved by the Public Utilities Commission. Good Energy will be working with them to procure their supply. And Patrick, could you speak to, you may not want to mention particular communities, but we do have another crop that could come in after those. Am I correct?
Yeah. So these are the first communities to get the plans approved. They were the first in Rhode Island, which is really exciting. And I guess what's also great is that the first time always takes a while. So the Public Utilities Commission, I think we took about a year to go through the Public Utilities Commission with most of these, but it really now that they really understand the process. We've developed, I think, a pretty good template process with them. So when we submitted Newport, we actually submitted them at the beginning of this year. They got their approval in a couple months, which is just awesome. So compared to particularly Massachusetts, where regulatory approval is taking multiple years, which is just really a travesty. So we're really excited that Rhode Island regulators seem to be pretty supportive of this being able to be implemented quickly. So we've got Narragansett is moving through the public review process right now for their plan. And just as a little bit of background, every community develops an aggregation plan. That's one of the key things that Good Energy helps the community with, and you approve that locally, and then it goes on to the state regulators for their approval. And once you have those approvals, then you're ready to launch your program. And we're talking with a number of other communities who are interested. Middletown, Rhode Island actually just had this morning, proposals were due for them. So they're looking to select a consultant. So yeah, we're excited. There's a lot of interest, and I think, we're really thankful for these first movers who wanted to get going and pave the way.
Great. So folks, our guest, and does anybody have any questions, any comments? You can put into the chat, or you can just unmute yourself, I think.
Yeah.
Sure, I can go first. Thank you. That's a great session. I'll introduce myself first. My name is Jaylam. I am part of Capline's Community Energy Division, and we're based out of the other side of the country in San Diego. And I was kind of curious, do your communities have ideas on programs they might want to implement, and what sort of, I guess, after the first CAT goal, long term, is there something in the pipeline like that?
So I think what Jalen is asking is beyond the electricity supply, greening it up, what more are we looking at?
Because that has been our experience here and in the communities we've served elsewhere in California as well as in the East Coast, is that once communities have access, they always are looking for more and how much more they can get through, and programs are great enablers.
Yeah, Patrick, do you want to go first and I'll wrap up on that one?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think yes. I think our communities look at these programs as like just really powerful vehicles. There's very few other examples of opt-out programs, right? We get to really so just for others, typically 80 to 90% of the community is remaining in these programs because you always have the right to opt out. So it's a really powerful way to bring your whole community along, or a large part of it. And so, yeah, I think we're seeing a lot of excitement for communities to get moving with, first off, clean, competitive, and stably priced power. And I think they do see that, though, as the beginning, and particularly a lot of interest on programs that could help with lower income customers and minority communities that have been historically disadvantaged by the energy system. So I think there's a lot of appetite for that expansion over time.
Yeah, what we've heard is that California's got a slightly different model, or a significantly different way of doing aggregation than we have here in Massachusetts and Rhode Island. But in general, add to what Patrick said, traditionally in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, Massachusetts has had communities will do 3-year contracts, not very long contracts. But I think now the communities have been doing this, and sometimes they've renewed maybe twice or maybe at least, and so they're in the game for the long term, but the contracts have been short term. Now they begin to ask, what more can they do? I think you will see some communities signing longer term contracts, and that enables a lot of things that can happen more locally generated power. They could sign a contract directly with the generator. They could do that. We would encourage communities to think of that. They can also do with approval from the Public Utilities Commission, could do some things like support, as Patrick said, they could support low-income people. They could develop a local energy project. It doesn't always even have to be supply. It could be energy efficiency. It could be maybe a microgrid, trying to help the community be more resilient during power outages, which is like maybe battery storage. It might be about supporting the electric vehicle infrastructure in the community. And we sort of call that aggregation 2.0 around here. And I think we'll get there. In Massachusetts and Rhode Island, both have pretty robust policies around energy efficiency and electric vehicles and storage. And we want the communities to be able to tap into those, not recreate the wheel, but make their community a little bit more competitive if they have to be with other communities. So we're going to use the aggregation, I think, to lever all those possibilities. But I think the first part, and actually it was only a couple of years ago, Rhode Island had a law that said that communities could aggregate, but people had to opt into the program. So no supplier was interested in serving the community. But we changed the law, so now it's opt out, as Patrick said. So more things can happen.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah. And we just have 46 seconds left, according to the message I just got. Do we have any other questions? I hope this was helpful to people. Well, with that, why don't we go rejoin the big group for just a few more minutes and we'll close it out.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everyone.